Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Colton Boutique Show. Joining me all the way from the other side of the pond is Mr. James Walker. James, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm brilliant. Hope you are as well. Good to see you.
Thank you, and you as well. You are the CEO of Bike and generally a major player in the world of dining, culinary. How did your career begin in the food industry?
So it's an interesting question, and probably the answer will surprise people because it surprises me a bit. I was working in the import-export business for records. You are a younger man than I, it appears, but you probably remember at some point they invented a format called compact discs, and I was importing and exporting compact discs around the world, and worked a bit much, which is a good caution for me, and left Boston, where I had been living, and went and moved to an island called Martha's Vineyard to try to recuperate, and got a little bored with recuperation and decided to take a job in at a deli. And over, a period of weeks and months, as I tried to kind of grow the profitability of this deli, started becoming more interested in food and scratch food and how that it could influence a restaurant, and somehow caught the eye of a local chef by the name of Jimmy Bradley, who was running a fine dining restaurant, who saw something in me back, this is back in the mid-90s, and asked me to join his team. And that not only kind of was my introduction to fine dining, but also my introduction to wine. And as I'm sure you know, if you step into that fine dining world, you get a lot of experience very quickly. It wasn't unusual for my day to start at 4 a.m. and end right before midnight. So you get a lot of experience very, very quickly, and you're surrounded by other individuals who are very passionate about food and wine, and that kind of set the stage for what's really become a 30-year passion around food, hospitality, and wine.
Brilliant. And you touched upon what would be my next question, which is, of course, your ventures into wine. Is that where really your journey with wine began, or was it before you started your professional career? And was there a moment that you can remember that sparked your interest in wine? And was it linked to a particular wine, say like a Bordeaux or a Napa? Or...
Yeah. So, I think my interest in wine really started with kind of that foray into fine dining, because it was, obviously was super important to the menu, and there were lots of conversations around wine pairings and what have you. I'm somebody who I became a chef, and I worked in fine dining restaurants, and then I went to culinary school. A lot of my career and life is doing things backwards. So, I worked in restaurants, and then I went to France to get some formal training. And I remember going into a grocery store and being an American, I'm buying a week's worth of Coca-Cola, and, having the shopkeepers look at me like I was insane. Mr. Crazy American, why are you shopping for a week? Just come back tomorrow. And, this is before iPhones or any of that type of technology. And I remember going back to the hotel and looking at my bill and figuring out that the price of a Coca-Cola in Paris was ridiculously expensive. And for the rest of my time in Paris, switched over to drinking, I think it was Mouton Cadet, right? Because it was less expensive for a bottle of that than Coca-Cola. So this kind of started my interest in wine and my drinking of wine. And that went on for a number of years, where I just, was interested, and yes, I will have a glass of wine. What do you have? And then I think right about 2000 or 2001, I was in Miami in the United States, and was having dinner with a fairly popular chef in the US, by the name of Norman Van Aken, and we were just having a great time at the table. And I had been transporting a case of wine for a friend of mine, and we're having a great meal. And I was like, I got a case of wine, and I think it's supposedly pretty good. Let me see if this guy will let me have a bottle of it. I'll pay him for it, but let me see whatever that wine is that I got in the car. Let me go grab a bottle and let's sit down and let's drink it, because I heard that it's pretty good. So I went and, I called this guy, and he said, yeah, help yourself, grab a bottle. I think you'll like it. And I brought this bottle in, and Norman Van Aken, the chef and a colleague I was with, opened this bottle of wine. And probably not too dissimilar from other people who are really passionate about wine now, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I've been drinking wine for like 10 years. What the hell is this? This is something completely different. And it was amazing. It was complex. It was fruit forward. There was layers immediately upon pouring that I just, so much more sophisticated and nuanced. And then it got better and better and better, and it paired with the food. So it was really the first time. Epiphany would be the word. And I know that's a word people don't use anymore. But it was an epiphany. And that wine, that'd be your next question. What the heck was that wine? That wine was a 1989 Lynch Bage. And still, I always in my cellar, always have 89 Lynch Bage. And I know there's kind of this, what's better, the 89 or 90 Lynch Bage? And it's a super fun side-by-side to do. But for me, going back to probably 2000 and drinking that in Miami with Chef Norman Van Aken and a colleague, still I can think of, every layer in that amazing wine.
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. I've 1989 Lynch Bage, right? It's one of those epiphany wines. It's a word, you're right, that's not used as often now, but it is absolutely incredible. And it's a great chateau as well.
For sure. And listen, that's a wine that punches above its weight class, right? I understand, the 89 and 90 and maybe now the 2000, Lynch Bage, their pricing certainly increased over time, but I still find it to be a great value for the quality you get.
For sure. And with that, since 2000, have your tastes changed over the years or simply expanded? And are there wines that you like now that you didn't before? Or are there any wines that you used to like that you now avoid?
Yeah. And this is a really interesting question. And I'll try to stop saying that about all your questions, but you have good questions.
Thank you.
So, when I had this epiphany around the Lynch Bage, I went from, I took whatever wine was offered to me to really selecting wines. And being in the United States back in 2000, you didn't have tools like Wine Searcher or access to online wine like you do now. There is rarely a bottle of wine that I want today that I can't find from my laptop in a matter of minutes. But back then it was quite difficult. So my initial foray into seeking wines was very targeted at California. And, I remember getting on the Turley list for Turley Zinfandel and then Kistler and some of those initial wines more than 20 years ago. I was, super excited to be getting a Turley mailer. So those were the wines that I got super excited about over 20 years ago. And I will tell you, I still love a bottle of Turley. I'm in Cincinnati for some business meetings tonight. I've already looked at the wine list, as I do. I tend to be very planful with my eating and drinking. And they've got Turley on the menu, and tonight I'll be drinking Turley. So I still love those wines that I got excited about. I still always keep 89 Lynch Bage. So I think the answer to your question is I still love those wines, but I am most interested today, not in a category of wine. So it's not Burgundy or Bordeaux or Shiraz or Super Tuscans. I am most interested, and the wine I want to drink next, more often than not, is one that I haven't had. I'm much more excited about that. So maybe to answer your question in a little different way, back in 2000, 01, 02, if I liked a wine, I bought as much of that specific wine that I could get my hands on. You know, if it was Turley, Haynes, Zinfandel, and they would sell me 12 bottles, I bought 12 bottles, and I was super excited to do so. I love Angelus, Chateau Angelus, but still, maybe I'll buy 3 bottles because it's not that I don't love that wine and want to experience it and experience over time. I want to spread my wine investment and my cellar space over as many different experiences as possible. So I think that's a paradigm shift from buying a lot of one to really spreading my wine dollars, if you will, across a wide selection.
That's a very smart strategy, to be honest. And I do have you to blame, and my wife kind of is annoyed at you as well, because when I was more present with wine Twitter and I started seeing your accounts in particular, and then obviously from there it kind of spirals with who you've connected with and who you engage with, vice versa. And all the time I kept seeing you know, Turley. And I remember once when I was in central London, I was in this merchant's place and they had this Turley wine. I said, right, James Walker, he's raved about this, let me try it. And it was absolutely incredible. And it's definitely one of the staples in my mini cellar at home, because it's a great drinking wine for sure.
Great value too. And listen, maybe the coolest wine bottle there is, right? Yeah, just because of the design. And I was very fortunate to get to talk to Larry Turley a little bit. He started out in Atlanta. I had lived in Atlanta. And I remember reaching out to him in the early days when I started collecting, and I wasn't maybe as sophisticated from a cellar standpoint as I am now. I mean, the physical construction of a wine cellar. I was like, you know, Larry, I love the way your bottles look, but they won't fit in my cellar. You know, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making bottles that won't fit in your cellar. I said, why would you do it? He goes, listen, I think Zinfandels are made to be drunk young when they're fruit forward and they're peppery. And I was like, wow, that's okay. Thank you. And I said, by the way, you know, what is the appropriate wine pairing, food pairing for a Turley Zinfandel? And he said, a porterhouse steak bigger than your head. So those are my 2 Larry Turley sound bites.
Wow, that's good advice. That is good advice. I might have to follow that this evening. But I've found that you're fond of Northern Rhones. Do you think that single vineyard Rhone varieties like a Syrah, Grenache from the USA are of equal quality now?
Wow, you just said your wife is not particularly fond of me or harbors a grudge. This is a perfect way for me to alienate, I think, a whole continent now, right? Yeah. So I'm going to be very careful with my answer. I do think that, in particular, Central Coast California Rhone varietals are every bit as good as their French counterparts, but I think they are different, and therefore I don't think they're comparable. So, you know, it's a Sophie's choice type of, you know, situation. Now, sometimes I have an amazing wife. She's the best person I know, the most honest, loving, and fair person I know. And, you know, she would never pick her favorite amongst our children. She would never do that. All children are brilliant. And I say, listen, at any point in time, I can tell you which of my children is my favorite, and which one is on my bad side at any point in time. And that's how I feel about kind of Rhone varietals around the world. The California ones are plusher and they're more vibrant and they're more fruit forward, and they probably don't have the ageability. I've had French Rhone varietals going back even recently, back into the 70s, that blew my mind. And, you know, darker fruits and the terroir that obviously French wines tend to be a little more sophisticated and more pronounced than the American wines. It's just different experience, but I find them both for what they are at a similar, very high quality level.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And if I knew nothing about American Rhone style wines, where would you suggest that I start?
Paso Robles and Saxum. You know, I think Jamesbury Vineyard, you know, it was one of those pieces of property. I have a picture of myself standing in front of a sign that says James Berry Vineyard, because to me it was like visiting a first growth piece of property, certainly for kind of that greater Central Coast, Central California area, because the wines are just so amazing. So I would say it's a great way to experience the quality that I'm talking about and the craveability of those wines and the fruit forwardness and everything that California Rhone varietals have to offer. And it kind of replicates California, right? It's bright and it's forward and all these types of things. I think that's an amazing place to start.
Okay, very good advice. Thank you for that.
Or listen, how about Sin Qua Non? I can't leave Manfred Krankel. I don't know that I would start with Sin Qua Non. I might end with Sin Qua Non. And listen, you're probably down the road from Hedonism Wines. They probably got the most amazing Manfred Krankel Sin Qua Non collection I've ever seen in the world. So listen, if you also want to have your wife be a little upset at me, take your credit card and swing by Hedonism Wines tonight and pick up a bottle of Manfred Krankel's Sin Qua Non, and that'll put me on her list for good.
It certainly would do. Put me on the blacklist as well. But with regards to your purchasing habits, though, is there a wine in particular, or wines that, irrespective of the vintage year, off vintage, on vintage, etc., that you would still buy irrespective of the so-called quality?
Yeah. So I am one of those individuals who, there's finite cellar space, right? I've got a decent sized cellar, but listen, it's like water, right? On day one, that cellar, you're like, wow, this will last for years, and it's cavernous with its capacity, and then a year later, you've got like boxes of unopened wine on the floor. So I tend to really select wines by vintage, but there are wines that I buy every offering for Sin Qua Non. And kind of all the Sin Qua Non, other wines that are out there for that would be associated with that. I tend to buy Caymus and Opus 1 every single year, because in the US, for my friends, and more often than not, the wines I'm drinking aren't the wine I selected based on what I want. I select wines based on who I'm with. So, people will comment, oh, why are you drinking a young California wine? Don't you know better? Okay, let's not get into don't you know better, because next we're going to be talking about putting ketchup on things and the ketchup hate that's out there in the world. I select wines based on the people I'm with, and I want them to love it. And whether it's Caymus or Opus 1, those are crowd-pleasing wines, and people really enjoy them. So I always will buy Opus 1 on release. I will always buy Caymus on release, because there's someone that I will have dinner with throughout the months that love to have those wines.
Very good. When it comes to deciding what to buy, as well as your own judgment, your own preferences, which critics do you tend to agree with more?
Well, so I read them all. I really do like Cellar Tracker, because it's kind of it's the crowdsourced, aggregated scoring, right? So it's the Rotten Tomatoes of the wine world, right? We all get to weigh in, and I like that. And what I like about Cellar Tracker is I tend to read the most recent reviews, because listen, there's no question that, we'll stay on Lynch-Bage, that an 89 or 90 Lynch-Bage, or an 89 or 90 Leoville Las Casas, those are amazing wines. I don't have to say, is that a good wine or not? No, I know it's a great wine. But the question is it a great wine, and is it drinking well today? So what I like about Cellar Tracker is it allows me to understand how a wine is going to be drinking today. Beyond that, even though I read every Wine Spectator cover to cover, my preference is single reviewers, like Jeb or folks like that, where it's one person where I can calibrate. So for years, Robert Parker, he did his own reviews. And it wasn't that I agreed or disagreed with Robert Parker, it's I knew how to calibrate against it. So if Robert Parker gave, a Cabernet a 99 score, I would buy that, but I also would know that there was no way that I should open that bottle for 15 years because he typically would score Cabernets based on their age worthiness. So Cellar Tracker is probably the tool I use the most as far as what I'm going to drink tonight, and looking at like Jeb or single reviewers that I can calibrate against helps me determine kind of what I'm going to invest in for the future.
Okay, brilliant. And as an investment that you just mentioned, what is the general principle for you when selecting an investment grade wine?
So my tastes do change, and I may, wines also tend to accelerate or increase. They beat the stock market every year. They increase in their value. One of the rules and how I kind of manage myself is if I have guests over to my home, one of my favorite things is to send them down and say, grab a bottle in the cellar. And it's more fun to send somebody who doesn't know wine than somebody who does. Because if you send, like if you came to my house, and hopefully at some point you will, you're not going to go down and say, oh, there's a 97 Screaming Eagle. Yeah, let me bring that up and let's pop that on the back porch. You're gonna figure, oh, that would be rude of me. And being English, you're super worried about being polite, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
if I send a friend down who's like, yeah, let me go grab a bottle of red, he might come up and say, yeah, I found this bottle. It's got a little, it's got a bird on it. That looked pretty cool. Let's open that. So I don't want anything in my cellar that I wouldn't open for a friend without second guessing at all. So as I'm looking at buying wines, I want wines that I think will maintain their value. And not necessarily I'm worried about appreciation, but if I so choose that I feel I'm heavy on that wine. Like recently, I looked across and I had a lot of Harlan Estate for some really nice vintages, but I started getting in that opinion where it's like, am I going to be comfortable if somebody comes up from the basement, from the cellar with a $1,700 bottle of Harlan Estate? Or is that going to be a little awkward? So listen, I probably had I had more Harlan Estate than I probably should have, and I ended up selling it. So from an investment standpoint, I want wines that I'm comfortable aren't going to lose value because of their lack of age worthiness. And generally, I will select those vintages that either maintain their value or accelerate, in case I get in a position where I just no longer fancy those wines or I feel them a little long, that I am able to go to the market and at least recoup my investment, or better yet, see some escalation against what I paid for it. So I'm pretty selective, especially now, about kind of what I'm laying down in the cellar.
That's a very good strategy. Makes complete sense as well, because like you said, if you're a bit heavy on something, you want the ability to be able to resell it on for ideally more than what you paid for it initially. So it's kind of replenishing itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and listen, to me, that's super fun, right? So if I buy, and listen, we're talking about French, typically first gross, or kind of those California cult Cabernets, where they are age worthy. And when I have access to them, because most of the cults, as you know, come out on allocation lists, and you're buying French first gross kind of on futures. So you buy a lot, and listen, maybe you love those wines, but either the price increases to the point that you feel uncomfortable with that being an everyday wine, and I want all of my wines to be everyday wines. Or you just say, listen, do I really need 12 bottles of this single wine? I'd rather have 6 bottles of that and 6 bottles of something else. And you're able to realize kind of the arbitrage value, if you will, against that individual wine that you're selling. It's great then to go reinvest that in something else. One of the things I tell my wife, we'll drink a wine and she'll say, what's the value of this? And I said, well, what's the value of it, or what do I have in it? Because those are very, very different, situations, hopefully. And I always look at it as, listen, I've got $150 in this, or 150 quid where you are. So it doesn't matter that down the street it's going for 900. To me, it's $150 bottle of wine, and that's a great price point to drink with friends on a special Friday night. And I don't feel price conscious, or I don't worry about the investment. And I think that arbitrage, kind of moving your collection along and investing wisely, allows you to do that.
As you're aware, fine wine is such a broad arena, and it can sometimes be quite daunting from an outside looking in. Like I said, if I went into your cellar, which I hope I have the honor of doing one day, and if I do take 2 bottles of 1997 Screaming Eagle, of course, we know what we're going to get. But as I said, from the outside looking to get in, there is that air of pretentiousness, especially here in the UK, that you find with, we call it wine snobbery. So it can be intimidating for people to get in. So for yourself, you're very down to earth, irrespective of how great your collection is and will continue to be. Is there any advice that you'd give to a novice wine lover, or someone who's attempting to get involved in wine and become a lover?
First of all, I love the comments about wine snobbery, because to me, wine is just so fun, right? There's just such an amazing social aspect to it. If I drink wine blind and score it on, let's use the Robert Parker, the Wine Advocate traditional scale of 1 to 100, and 2 days later I have that same wine blind, but I have it with friends at, let's say, Michael Lomonaco's Porterhouse, one of my favorite restaurants in New York, I guarantee I would score that wine higher. So to me, wine is about hospitality, and, it's about coming together. So, wine snobbery and, frankly, culinary snobbery are things that really have kind of turned me off, and I try to stay away from. My mother-in-law, who I love dearly, helped educate me that I needed to be more open and down to earth. When 20 years ago, the pinnacle of my collection was a 1997 Turley Haynes Zinfandel that I brought to Thanksgiving dinner to watch her drop 2 ice cubes in that wine. Oh. And initially I was like, whoa. And I said to myself, wow, that's how she wants to drink that wine. Why would I feel, I'm the bad guy here? And I still think back on that. So listen, I love people who are trying to learn more about wine, and they've had some wines they've liked. And I think I still read about wine. I still read the trades. I still read reviews every single day. The advice I would have is try to find, whether it's a reviewer or a friend or a negotiant or a wine salesman, find somebody who you're able to align with from a taste standpoint. So if they recommend, if you come in and say, listen, I had a bottle of, let's use Caymus. I had a bottle of Caymus. I really enjoyed it. Somebody who's able to say, okay, I get it. You like vanilla, you like fruit forwardness, you like kind of that blueberry finish or that vanilla finish, and they're able to recommend other wines in that category that kind of match what you like. And I think there's some apps out there that help with this. I know, working to help my wife understand her palate, and being a Duke graduate, I built a regression analysis model where over maybe 100 evenings, I was able to say, Sarah, you like fruit forward wines that aren't less than 5 years old, but not more than 10 years old. So I think, finding somebody who helps guide you along your journey, whether that's a reviewer or a wine salesman or a friend, can really help. Because listen, otherwise you get in this situation where you're buying wines that are more expensive than you need to, or wines that have a big reputation that may just not be right for your palate.
So when are we going to be seeing this James Walker wine up then?
Yeah, I think I've got enough literally and figuratively on my plate right now. Yeah, so I'm going to stay on the consumer side, I believe.
What about Vivino? Are you familiar with Vivino, and do you use them from time to time or not really?
Listen, I think it's a great system. It's not one that I use a great deal. I think, as you amass a larger cellar, and amass sounds like, if ever there was an arrogant term, right? I've amassed
but it's honest. You've amassed a great cellar.
Yeah, listen, I've got a large cellar. Now it's really, what's super fun for me is saying, okay, I feel that I've got Angelus covered. I've got, whatever. I want to read, I want to research, I want to find a wine. And still every day I find out about a wine that I haven't heard of. And I'm able to go out, because now it is so easy to find bottles of wine using the internet and tools like Wine Searcher, where I'm able to go out and kind of sniper that wine. And that's super fun for me today. Go find kind of those experiences that I haven't had an opportunity to really try.
Yes. All right. Brilliant. Brilliant. And again, you eat some of the best foods. You pair them with some of the most great, phenomenal wines that there is. What about the oddest wine and food pairing you've had over the years?
So during COVID, I get to spend a lot more time at home. I'm usually on the road a huge amount. And, kudos to my wife, and also kudos to Tim Cook, my Duke alumni brother over at Apple, for giving us great technology where I can visually talk to my wife every day throughout the day. I think in the 20 plus years we've been together, my wife and I have talked every single day. Wow. But during COVID, I got to spend more time at home, and I cooked a great deal. And I got to really explore things. And one of the things that we did that was super fun around wine pairings is, you may know, I've been associated with a brand that I love and is loved around the world called Nathan's Famous.
Yes.
And there was a sommelier in Alabama that was doing a wine and hot dog virtual tasting. Wow. And I sent this sommelier a message, and I said, listen, at the time I was running the restaurant division for Nathan's Famous. I said, listen, I'm not trying to do anything for Nathan's Famous. Nathan's Famous has enough brand awareness, but could I send you some hot dogs? And is there any way I could join this? I would love to do so. And I could invite maybe some well-known chef friends of mine, like Mark Miller and Michael Monaco and David Burke, some of the top chefs. We'd all like to join in. And we did a virtual Nathan's Famous hot dog and wine pairing event where sommeliers and chefs did something with a hot dog and then paired wine to it. And it was super fun. And Nathan's Famous hot dogs are all beef. They have a strong flavor of garlic and smoke and paprika, big umami flavor profile. So they're great from a pairing standpoint. But also, if you think of all the toppings you can put on a hot dog, whether it's sauerkraut, which is acidic and vinegary. In my case, loving my countrymen back in England, I of course did Nathan's Famous chili dog Wellington, as one would, right?
Of course.
Did a wine pairing against that, and just super, super fun. And kind of, you talk about wine snobbery, to me, the opposite of that is, open a first growth with cold pizza for breakfast. Yes. And have a bowl of cereal with, a plush California Chardonnay, listen, if you're not having fun with wine, or you feel that there's only certain circumstances that are worthy of a world-class wine, I would say you probably need to lighten up a little bit.
I agreed on that massively. And would I be wrong to assume that with the way in which you describe Nathan's Famous, that that'd be better off paired, say, for more like a Californian style wine, or would that be more like an old world, or even like a say like a more newer world, like Pinot Noir, like from New Zealand or even from America?
So it's hard for me to give you a simple answer. And to me, there's nuance in here. So when I think of Nathan's Famous, all beef, so right away, yes, you're on the beef, but how are you going to cook that? If you're going to cook it on a wood fire, that hot dog, because of the fat content, is going to pick up nuances of smoke and char that I think might push you to Polyak. Okay. Or if you're going to cook it on a flat top, are you going to condiment that with spicy mustard? That might push you towards a Riesling. I think that's one of the great things about wine pairing is nuances in the food push you towards different pairings. And as we're talking about pairings, you may or may not know, but I celebrated my birthday the other day. And I had a lovely, my birth year is 1968, and I was traveling for work. And I said, listen, I want to have some fun. And I was by myself. I was staying in, a hotel down the street. I went to Williams-Sonoma and I said, I need a wine glass. And they said, well, I'm not sure we sell wine glasses. We sell sets of wine glasses. Well, I need just one. So the sales associate was brilliant. She went in the back. She goes, well, somebody returned some broken glasses. There's one that's not broken. We'll just give it to you. I'm like, okay, great. So she gave me that. And I bought a wine key, and I had brought with me a 68 BV Latour. I went outside at the hotel, and I ordered Dickey's barbecue, pork barbecue, because I thought as that 68 had aged, it had picked up a lot of depth and kind of an Amarone type of kind of raisiny character, and it still had some fruit. And I'm like, I think that would pair very nicely with smoked pork. And I sat outside, got my wine swirl photo as I do. Yeah. And I had a half bottle of 1968 BV Latour with Dickey's pork barbecue by myself, sitting at, a mid-range kind of discount hotel at 6 p.m. on my lonesome. And I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. So I think whether it's a Nathan's Famous hot dog and it's grilled with your family, whether it's Uber Eats and Dickey's barbecue, I think wine pairings can be super, super fun. And I think it's not only okay to have a mismatch, meaning, Nathan's Famous hot dog is obviously a very inexpensive product. It's okay to have that with a really expensive French growth wine. In fact, I think that can be super fun. Anybody can pair, Jean-Georges foie gras with an 89 Chateau Yquem. What a brilliant pairing. Oh yeah, nice job on that. That was a bit of a stretch, 89 Yquem and foie gras. Good on you there, right? Yeah, but listen, I think I would challenge listeners to have a lot more fun and do unusual pairings. Do the Aubryon or Cheval Blanc with an In-N-Out burger, with the wine in a paper bag. Like Miles and Sideways. I think we should all do that, frankly, a couple times a month. Agreed.
And I think we certainly would accept that challenge, and the viewers at home will certainly accept that challenge as well. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, you mentioned about your wine.
Please tag me in it, because I would love to see if people actually did that.
We'll do that. And we'll make sure everyone else does that too, without question. But you touched upon your famous, and not Nathan's Famous, but James Walker's famous wine swirl. And I've tried for the life of me at home, pour it in a glass, taking a picture, and whatever. It just creates a mess. Now I've got a glass here. I've got a nice bottle of red here.
Sure.
So what I would like is,
so from the side, it almost looks like Paul Meyer. But let's see what you got in the glass.
It's a Brunello di Montalcino 2013.
Brilliant. All right, very good.
Marinetto. So on our websites, Colton Boutique Uncorked. So how much would you suggest pouring?
So I would say probably 2 ounces. So generally, I'm somebody who likes low pour. So I think you got enough, maybe even a bit too much there, but certainly more than enough. You know, I'm not the most dexterous person in the world. So generally, I like low wine pours. I love to see how wines evolve in the glass. So, you know, I don't pour a big glass, I pour lower pours. And I think specific to wine swirl, I want to see in the photo, the difference, you know, kind of between a massive wine in the corner of the glass with thinner wine. You know, I'm right-handed. So typically what you see is as that wine swirls, it's going counterclockwise, which means it's a little thinner to the left, a little deeper to the right. And the way you get those great photos is basically you want to have a lot of backlighting and very little forward lighting. So where you are, I would recommend that you swirl that up against the window that looks like it's to your left. Here? Yeah. So, you know, you're good. There you go. And yep. So as you can see, what that window's providing is, you know, the backlighting that highlights the colors in the wine. And I think, you know, I've done this for a few years now, and I started posting on Instagram side-by-side photos where this is the bottle and this is what the wine looks like. And listen, I don't know if people like it or not. You know, people on Instagram look at it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I go back and look at it. And not only is it the color, but I can see the viscosity and the body of the wine and the nuance. And it's just super fun for me. And it kind of sparks that memory. Going back, I posted photos of that 68 BV Latour. And it was so interesting, you know, kind of the rust color as that wine had aged. Where if we grabbed a 2016, you know, it's bright cherry red. And over the years, how that had matured. So listen, it's something I enjoy doing. I love looking at wine and smelling wine. You know, that's how you do it. Good backlighting, so the light shines through the wine, making sure your glass is not too full. And better if the room you're in is a little darker than the backlighting. But that's, you know, that's how, and I would say natural lighting is always best. So if I have a super special wine, and listen, whatever social filters other people have, I think my wife would help testify I don't have. So listen, I can be in a 3 Michelin star restaurant and get a great glass of wine that I'm super excited about. Maybe it's something I've been dying to try, and look at it and smell it and be like, okay, I need to walk out in the parking lot for a minute because I have to see this with the daylight. And, you know, I know that people are like, this guy is bonkers. He's completely mental. You know, he's walking out in the parking lot with the Latache, and they've got like 3 waiters ready to tackle me because they think I'm going to dine and dash. Listen, I'm okay with that. But I think looking at wine in, you know, a beautiful blue sky as a backdrop with natural lighting, you can really see all the nuance in that wine, and it is great for the wine swirl photo.
Certainly is. I'll be practicing that more at home this evening. So thank you for that. Now, on to even more fun things, if we can make things a lot more fun. You're clearly a massive James Bond fan. Which 3 James Bonds, not the actual actors who play the role, but the actual characters, dead or alive, if they're still with us today or not, would you love to have over for dinner? And what wine would you serve them, or even champagne, or a bit of both? Yeah, what would you serve them?
Wow. So, this is a really interesting question. So I think, so you're saying characters, not actors.
Well, we can do both. It's either or.
Okay. So listen, I grew up on James Bond. I think it was the first movie, my parents being very religious, and kind of worried about things. It was the first kind of movie that didn't have a Disney character in it that I was allowed to go to, and I got to go to the No Time to Die premiere at the Royal Albert Hall. And listen, if that doesn't set you up for the rest of your life, it certainly does. So listen, Daniel Craig, and the fact that Angelus, which I already loved, was so clearly featured across some of the Daniel Craig movies. You got to get Daniel Craig in there. And we're the same age, which is a constant reminder of just how poor shape and visual condition I'm in. The fact that Daniel Craig and I are the same age is a constant source of annoyance. So Daniel Craig, I think when you look across some of the characters, Auric Goldfinger, which has the greatest Bond line, in history with "No, I expect you to die, Mr. Bond. I won't try to do it." Seems like a guy that you want to have at the table. And then, I think Blofeld, and as much as I love Donald Pleasance, listen, Christopher Waltz is just he's an amazing actor, and I think he brought that role to life. And listen, we would have to drink Bollinger, I think. We would start with a glass of whiskey, we'd move on to Bollinger, we would absolutely move on to Chateau Angelus, and I would end with the Vesper Martini. So I know that might be a little controversial, but I see, that dinner going into the wee hours of the morning, finishing with the Vesper.
Sounds like a very good evening, definitely. And is there a wine that you're yet to try that you'd love to get your hands on?
Yeah. So listen, I'm a huge fan of Massetto. And I've been very lucky to have some of the great vintages of Massetto. The 2001 comes to mind. I think I've had it 7 different times, and every time I have it, it's just blows me away with just how fantastic that wine is, especially given that it's 100% Merlot. So when I look at Petrus, I've only had Petrus on a couple of outings, and I've never had a stellar vintage of Petrus. So would absolutely love to do, a great vintage of Petrus. And in particular, I would love to do it against some of the other great Merlots, certainly Massetto, Tuarita Rettagaffi, and some of those. But listen, while I've had Petrus, I haven't had just one of those flagship vintages in the right age. So that's still on the to-do list or the bucket list.
Okay, that's not a bad wine to go for either, for sure.
Indeed.
And again, we touched upon your cellar earlier, but if people who are on social media, if they were to go to at Walker Mobile, that's your handle, right? On Twitter, and they actually went through all of your pictures, they will see just how it is arguably the most beautiful wine cellar I've ever seen. And I'm not just saying that, I don't mince my words. How long did it take for you to build that wine cellar? And as well, if you wouldn't mind just sharing how you even came up with that table concept that you've got in the middle of your cellar room as well.
So lots of fun. So the table itself goes back to the early 2000s. And this is when, I really was trying to lay my hands on every bottle I could. I was living in Atlanta, and I didn't have a wine cellar in the home. I had a standing wine cellar. I think I had like a vino cave. in the home, and I was using wine storage in a facility because I think at that time, I was buying everything I could get my hands on, and I got to like 5,000 bottles, and it was a lot to manage. And I loved everything about wine. I love the pomp and circumstance of wine. When you have a great sommelier and he cleans the glass with wine, and he holds it up and he does all those things, I'm still like, fanboying all about it. I'm just like, wow, this guy's so cool. So I had all of these OWCs, all these original wood crates, and I'm, my wife's like, you got to have 100 of these. Can you throw them away? And I, of course, said, no, I cannot. Those are treasured children. Those are great memories.
Yeah.
In my neighborhood, somebody was doing a yard sale. I think maybe this is an American phenomenon: yard sale, tag sale, garage sale. But
we have a car boot sale, literally. So
okay,
the back of
all right,
so kind of similar.
For sure. So it's that kind of deal. And one of the neighbors was selling like tables and chairs that he had made. And I was like, you made these? He's like, yeah. I find some reclaimed wood, a church that's fallen down or something. And I get the wood and I make a chair, or I make a table, or I make a bench out of it. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm like, let me ask you, I have all these wooden wine crates. Could you, if I brought them to you, could you make him into a table? And this guy didn't consider himself a woodworker. He considered himself a wood artist, or a wood artiste, an artisanal carpenter. So what we agreed on is I would kind of prioritize. I remember, I had a wood crate from a 1990 Avianesi Vinsanto, and I had Screaming Eagles and all this. So I said, listen, these are crates that really mean a lot to me and were part of my wine journey. And what he did is he would take the design from the crate, so maybe where it would have the winery stamped, or in the case of Screaming Eagle, the actual logo, and he would cut it into wood slats and then basically put it into this table. And it took him probably 120 days to make that table, because he would steam the wood so you have this round table, and then poured resin on top. So, that table was created in the early 2000s, and I can still look back, and there's early vintages of Sinquanon and Screaming Eagle and Harlan Estate, and kind of all of these early milestones of my wine journey. Fast forward to my wife and I purchased a home in Connecticut, and I was living in one location in Connecticut, and using, again, that same, actually was Le Cave, and the compressor went out. And we were moving from one home to another. And I said to my wife, well, the compressor's out and it's hard to fix the compressor. They'll have to put a new one in. And, by the time we get the compressor fixed, it'll probably be about the same as, buying a new standing cellar. Should we buy a new standing cellar? Or we're going to this house, should I just build a cellar when we got there? He said, knowingly leading the wife to suggest that the better investment was to build a wine cellar. And the new home, and by the way, she knows these were all leading questions because she's much wiser and smarter than I am. And there's no trick I have that she isn't miles ahead of. So we have this large space in the basement, and again, leading, well, Sarah, do you think we should we divide this very large space awkwardly and build a small cellar that will probably run out of space? And then what will we do? Or should we take this whole large corner of the cellar and build a rather massive cellar? And of course she said, well, go ahead and take the whole space. Great. So as I started to design it, there were several things that were important to me. I wanted a cellar that was large enough to have people in it, because to me, I just love being in a wine cellar and, being surrounded with wine and memories. So I wanted it to be large enough where I could have that table that we're talking about in the cellar, because that's really a monument to milestones in my wine journey. That would be in the center of the cellar, but I wanted enough space that probably 6 or 8 people could stand around that, and we could drink wine, and we could talk about wine, and we could tell lies and stories and bad jokes. And art is really important to me, and I love the intersection of wine and art. So I wanted there to be enough wall space. where I could have some pieces. And I had a Thomas Arvid painting of a 97 Harlan Estate that means a lot to me. And I've got a Banksy with the rat on the champagne cork. The former CEO of Opus One had sent me something. So I've got these pieces that I wanted to accommodate. So as I began to map this cellar out, it was done in pieces where we did a major wine wall that would accommodate, let's call it maybe 700 bottles, and that allowed me to begin to populate the cellar. So the goals were to have enough space right away, but be able to increase the cellar over time. So all of the racks were designed to be able to be doubled up. So that left wall, that maybe 750 bottles, that's single deep, but it's designed that I can double it up when the time is right. And that single wall could move to closer to 1,500 bottles. I also wanted something that kind of spoke to me. I wanted it to be unique. I wanted it to be reminiscent of time that I've spent in Europe. So the flooring, I selected this black, white, gray motif that's kind of a play on fleur-de-lis. So you're going to have these porcelain tile floors, and it's going to be white and black, and then kind of black racking, and then you've got this kind of reddish wine crate table in the middle. And no one supported me in this. I have this documented, by the way. No one supported me. So like, you're crazy. It won't look good. It won't look right. That's not how wine cellars should look. And in particular, you in this floor of yours are just, you're mental. It's not how things are done. And generally, I'm pretty impervious to peer pressure as the way I live my life, and walking outside to a parking lot to take a photo of a glass of wine prove on an ongoing rateable basis. But I was starting to get a little okay, maybe that's maybe there is something there. And I was in Budapest, and I was finalizing kind of the general contractor to do the initial work, and you got to kind of start with the floor. And I arrived in this hotel in Budapest late, and kind of went to the desk and checked in, and the lobby was dark, and went to my room, went to sleep. I'm an early riser. I typically get up about 4 a.m. It was early daylight, and I went down to the main floor in the hotel, and it was the exact floor that I was thinking of putting in the wine cellar. Wow. And I was like, okay, there you go. If that's not a sign that I should put that in. So, all of this came together where it's gray walls and a white ceiling, black racking, this fleur-de-lis, white, black, and gray porcelain tile, and then that reddish hued wine crate table. Not only did it all work together, but it's it's kind of the intersection of old and new. And I love that, right? Because, listen, I want to drink an Australian Shiraz, and I want to have an American Grenache, but I also want to have old world wines. And I think the cellar really represents that intersection of old and new. And it certainly represents, the uniqueness of James Walker in kind of bringing those things together. And luckily, I think it turned out pretty nicely.
I think so. Even with where you've got the large bottles laid down, and there's another section where you've got your Riedel glasses too, which has also got some other wines there. And on the table, I think I saw recently, was it Pappy von Winkle? Is it bourbon or?
It is. So through COVID, I loved being at home, but I missed the social interaction around food and wine. So I thought to myself, what if I brought in a bottle of Pappy 23, which is kind of a very nice American bourbon. I'll bring in a bottle of 69 Oban, which is kind of my favorite Scotch. And I'll bring in a bottle of Louis. And I'll bring in corresponding glassware for each. What is the right glassware for each one of those occasions? And the idea will be when we get out of COVID, if we get out of COVID, and somebody comes to the house, they can pick a dram of whichever of these they like, come down to the cellar, because again, there's room in the cellar for us to, commiserate, tell lies, tell fishing stories, complain about politics, whatever it is, people do when they get together. And they can pick a dram of Pappy 23, Oban 69, or Louis as they like. And, we'll toast the future and put bad times behind us and look forward. So yeah, there's that as well.
Oh, that's really, really good. Thank you for that. And I'm going to be putting you on the spot now with a quick fire. So really no time to think here, James. It's a this or that. So I apologize in advance. Lafite or Mouton Rothschild?
Lafite.
Angelou or Cheval Blanc?
Cheval Blanc.
Monrose or Leoville Escasse?
Montrose.
Massetto or Sassicaia?
I think I already said Massetto.
Yeah. Ornellaia or Tignaiello?
Tinanello.
Okay. Opus One or Ridge Montebello?
For all kinds of emotional reasons, not necessarily what's in the bottle, but the memories, Opus.
Very good choice. Harlan Estates or Screaming Eagle?
Harlan Estate.
Penfolds Grange or Torbreck Runrig?
Penfolds.
Nice. Chateauneuf de Paps, Beaucastels or the Guigao Lalas?
That's a hard decision, but the Lalas, especially since you're saying Lalas, so you're making it a little easier.
Yeah. Dom Perignon or Krug?
I've got to go with, I love them both. It's a Sophie's choice type of situation, but because of the memories, I have to go with Dom.
Nice. Last couple, either Yquem with cheese or a Chateau Latour with steak.
I'm going to go with Yquem with cheese because I think there's more variability in the pairing, right? Listen, there's great steaks, but they live right here, right? Whether it's a porterhouse or whether it's a strip steak and how it's prepared. But when you open the world to cheese, so I love Yquem, I love Latour, I love steak, and I love cheese. But the reality is when you open the world to cheese, the world is much larger than I think a steak allows from a pairing and nuance standpoint.
Agree. And I think you've answered this one already, but hot dog or a corn dog?
Got to go with hot dog, and specifically Nathan's.
Nathan's, of course. Nathan's is the best, without question.
For sure.
So what is next for you in your ventures and your travels?
Trying to be as home as much as I possibly can. I don't have any more European travel planned. I was lucky enough to spend time in Brazil and in England in May. So I'm still went to dinner by Heston Blumenthal.
Very nice. Such
an amazing experience. That'll probably last me about 90 days of kind of reliving that experience. And then we'll see what the fall brings.
The last question, when are you going to come and see us?
So my answer, and I mean it very sincerely, is I come when invited. So it's I flew to London in early May. We had a tailwind, and I think I got there in like 5 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow!
I can't get to LA that quickly. And it was a great flight, Virgin Atlantic. There's a day flight out of New York. You got Wi-Fi the whole way. The sun's up. You land at dinner time. There's no adjustment to time change because you started in the morning and you end in the evening. So I come to London when I'm invited.
All right, we'll hold you to that. We'll get the invitation out very shortly as well. But no, James, honestly, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Best of luck with, I said, future ventures. We hope to see you soon. And thank you once again for joining the Coles Boutique Show.